The mansion was silent, far too quiet for a home that once echoed with laughter. Expensive toys lay untouched in golden sunlight, and two small children sat by the window, motionless, speechless, locked in a world their billionaire father could neither buy nor fix. For years, every doctor, every therapist, every miracle worker had failed. Then one morning, a new woman arrived. Her skin was dark, her smile bright, her presence calm yet unshakable. No one expected her to change anything. But within days, the house began to stir. And what happened next would defy everything money could control. Ethan Ward was a man the world envied, self-made billionaire, tech visionary, and owner of a mansion that glimmered on the hillside like a palace of glass. Yet behind those spotless walls lived a pain no fortune could soothe. His 3-year-old twins, Liam and Lucas, had never spoken a single word or taken a single step. Doctors labeled it a rare developmental condition, suggesting years of therapy, endless patience, and acceptance. Ethan heard only the silence that followed him from room to room. Nannies came and went like shadows. Some stayed for a week, others for a day, each one leaving defeated by the eerie stillness that hung around the children. Ethan's world had become an endless cycle of hope and heartbreak. He buried himself in board meetings and deals, pretending success could fill the void that echoed through his home. Then, one autumn morning, the agency sent someone new, a woman named Grace. She was different from the others, quiet but confident, dressed in modest clothes, her dark skin contrasting against the mansion's marble halls. Ethan barely looked up from his phone when she arrived. He had long stopped believing anyone could make a difference. Grace, however, didn't flinch at the silence. She knelt beside the twins, not with pity, but with understanding. She didn't try to make them speak or move. She sat with them, humming softly under her breath, letting the rhythm of her voice fill the air like sunlight through rain. Something subtle shifted that day, a sense that, perhaps for the first time, someone saw the children not as broken, but as waiting. Ethan noticed none of it. But the household staff whispered among themselves, because in that vast, lonely mansion, something small, but powerful, had begun to change. Days turned into weeks, and Grace's quiet routines began to ripple through the mansion. She never forced the twins to meet her eyes or repeat her words. Instead, she worked in rhythms, songs, gentle touches, patient silences. She would hum spirituals softly as she tidied, the kind of melodies born from endurance and hope. At first, the household found her methods strange, even naive. The head housekeeper whispered that the new help spends more time singing than cleaning. Ethan barely noticed. His world was quarterly earnings and global meetings. Yet one evening, as he walked through the hallway, he stopped. Through the half-open nursery door, he saw Grace kneeling on the floor, humming as one twin reached for a wooden block. For the first time in years, the sound of laughter, small, uncertain, but real, filled the air. Ethan froze. It was as if the mansion itself had exhaled after years of holding its breath. He told himself it was a coincidence. Still, he began to observe quietly from a distance. Grace brought warmth into cold spaces. She cooked differently, sang freely, and treated the twins not like delicate ornaments, but living souls. The staff noticed too. Some admired her, others less so. A few servants whispered subtle things about her luck in being hired, about how people like her didn't belong in a billionaire's mansion. Grace heard every word but never responded. Her silence was not surrender. It was strength. Each day the twins grew more animated. They followed her, humming with their eyes. They laughed when she clapped. They reached out when she sang their names. The invisible walls that had caged them were cracking. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the windows, Grace noticed Liam trying to stand. His knees trembled, his arms shook, but Grace only smiled, never rushing him. She whispered encouragement, steady as breath. Ethan entered mid-meeting, stunned. His assistant's voice echoed through the phone, but he barely heard it. His son, his silent, still son, was trying to walk. For the first time, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Something humbling, unsettling. Grace didn't just help his children. She made him question everything he thought power could buy. It happened one rainy afternoon. Thunder rolled across the sky as the mansion glowed with soft lamplight. Grace was with the twins, stacking colorful blocks on the rug. Ethan had canceled yet another meeting, though he told himself it was to observe progress. In truth, he had grown addicted to the moments that reminded him his children were more than medical reports. Grace began to hum, a tune older than the walls themselves, one she remembered from her grandmother's porch. The twins clapped along, laughing. Then, as if the melody itself summoned courage, Lucas took a step, wobbly, hesitant. Then another, and another. Grace's breath caught. Ethan rose from the chair in disbelief. Lucas stumbled forward, reaching for Grace's arms, falling into her lap. For a moment the world went silent. Then, out of that fragile quiet, came a sound that tore through the years of silence. Ma. It wasn't clear, but it was real. Ethan's heart clenched. Tears, unfamiliar and uninvited, blurred his vision. Grace held the child close, tears running freely down her own face. She didn't see the billionaire standing frozen, his certainty unraveling. She only saw two children who had finally found their voice. That night, Ethan sat alone in his office, the storm still echoing beyond the windows. For the first time, he realized what Grace had done was more than a miracle. She had restored something humanity had stripped away, not just from his children, but from him: compassion, faith, connection. Weeks passed, and laughter became the mansion's new language. The twins no longer sat still for hours. They crawled, toddled, and giggled endlessly. Grace never took credit. When reporters later asked about the miraculous recovery, she said they just needed to be seen. Ethan, however, saw more than progress. He began to notice the quiet prejudice that had once seemed invisible, how staff spoke to Grace differently, how they hesitated to share tables, how her brilliance was met with polite dismissal. He felt ashamed, not of them, but of himself, as he had always believed distance was dignity. One morning, he called the entire staff together. "Grace," he said, his voice steady, "isn't help. She's family. It wasn't grand or rehearsed, but it was honest." And though Grace only smiled in reply, the air shifted once more, this time for good. When Grace eventually left to start her own child care center in the city, the twins clung to her, crying in protest. Ethan promised to support her project, not as charity, but as faith repaid. Years later, her center would help dozens of children once labeled hopeless, proving that patience and love could outshine any diagnosis or prejudice. On quiet evenings, Ethan still visited the old nursery. The blocks, the laughter, the echo of that first word, each a reminder that true wealth was never in his bank account. It was in the courage of a woman who saw beyond color, beyond circumstance, and taught his children to do the same. Because sometimes change doesn't begin with grand gestures or fortunes. It begins with someone brave enough to love in a world that forgot how.